So as Jesus often did, we're using analogies from nature this morning to think about how we change and how we transform. And as we've seen with the caterpillar and the butterfly, change is not easy and it's not simple, and sometimes it's really messy. And so I was just been pondering, what does that look like for us? Because I don't know about you, but when, like donkeys years ago, when I first became a Christian and I heard about Jesus, and I thought, right, okay, so I'm going to get to know Jesus, I'm going to try and have this relationship with him and learn about God. I thought that was the change. Done, tick the box, that's it. And actually, what I'm learning as I'm getting older and older is that was the really, really tiny beginning step. And now God is just changing me all the time. And the Bible talks about how God uses his Spirit to change us, to produce fruit, like love and joy and peace and patience and kindness, gentleness, self-control, all those sorts of things. And they all sound really great. But we learn those things often by not having them. We learn what love is, yes, by being loved, but also by being in situations where actually we're not loved. And we learn self-control by being in situations where actually we feel completely out of control. And we feel scared. And so it's often through the not nice things that we change. And often life is really messy. And like that caterpillar in its chrysalis, sometimes life just feels like we're turning to soup. Everything is gone. Everything that we knew and we recognised about ourselves, about what we believe, about our friends, it can be all sorts of things that changes. And we're left thinking, what do I know about me? What do I know about God? How do I interact with the world? And I'm wondering, actually, if it's in those places, in that darkness of the chrysalis, where actually God does the most and the best transformation. And looking back, I know many of you know that family life has not been easy for me, and it's been hard a lot of the time. And there have been long seasons where I just thought, that's it, I've had enough. Can't be doing with this, can't cope, this is too much. And lots of people talk of the dark night of the soul, perhaps where you're questioning, where is God? I can't see you in this. And I guess I didn't question God in that time, but boy was I angry, because I didn't want to be going through all that. And I didn't question God, but I did tell him several ways he could change the situation, thank you very much. He didn't pick any of them. But looking back now, I'm a different person than I was then, because I've learnt through that. And God took all that mess and all that coming apart and hopelessness, and he built something more beautiful with it. And it might feel like we don't recognise ourselves. It might feel like it's just too much. But we read time and time again in the New Testament, and it's often the writer Paul who's saying it, that we need to be transformed. And we need to keep being transformed. And we need to let God change us. And I know, for me, having been in that horrible chrysalis where things were all just messed up, that actually I cope with things a lot better now. And I know that God was with me in that. And I think that is one of the biggest things I take away from that, is that actually I've learnt that when life feels dark and hard, is to look for God, and where is God? And naturally we kind of think, well, God's abandoned me then. God's not here. But actually, when we look for the light, it will be there, because God promises never to leave us. And I think for me now, I've got a long way to go, but oftentimes when I'm faced with a tricky situation, before going straight to panic, or maybe after just a few minutes of panic, I can say to God, what are you showing me through this? Where on earth are you? Because I know you're somewhere. And I think that is what I wanted to share this morning, is that actually when we look at the darkness, it's pretty dark. But if we're looking through the darkness for the light, then that darkness isn't as dark. And we can drag ourselves down looking at the dark. But if we can find just that little glimpse of light and hold on to that, I believe God holds on to us. And it's not easy, because my instinct is to yell and scream and say, what are you playing at, God? But it does mean that we are changed and we are being transformed. Paul talks about being transformed into the likeness of God. So we're not looking only for, we're not being the consumers that the caterpillars are, just eating all the time. We think, well, how, this is happening to me, but how can I interact with the world? How can I interact with the people I meet and make it a more positive place? How can I show God's love? How can I care? How can I be patient? Paul also says, rejoice in the Lord always. Say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. These qualities that God grows in us, don't be afraid of them, don't be ashamed of them, because the world needs qualities like that. The world needs more love and more gentleness, more compassion. Paul says, I've learned to live in contentment in any and every situation. Whether I've got plenty of food, whether I haven't got enough food. Whether things are good, whether things are bad. I'm content. And not content, I think, that the situation is okay and should stay like that, but content that he's with God in that situation and that God is with him. Sometimes it's really hard when you're in the chrysalis and you have so many questions and so many tears. It's hard to think, it's hard to see that you could ever become a butterfly. But you can. because that's what we're designed for. We're designed for a relationship with God. We're designed to get to know God better, to depend on him more. In the book of Micah, it says, he has shown you what is good and what the Lord requires of you, and that is to act justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly as you travel through life with God. That's what counts. That's what matters. So, a challenge for all of us this morning. When we find ourselves, and unfortunately, unlike the caterpillar and the butterfly, I don't think this is a one-time mess we find ourselves in. It happens again and again, but we learn through every time. So the challenge is, when we're in that chrysalis and in that dark moment, will we ask God to show us where the light is? And will we look at the light? And we might not be able to do it for long. We might only be able to do it for 5 minutes, and then we get consumed by the darkness again. But we can try. And the next day we might do it for 10 minutes. I was sitting eating breakfast a few weeks ago, looking out the window in the garden. And the door was open because it was slightly warmer than it is now. And I could hear a robin singing. And I love to listen to the birds sing. And I was looking out thinking, where is that robin? And I couldn't see him. And I kept looking. And the garden was mostly in shade because the sun hadn't quite come over the top of the house yet. And then I spotted him. And with the garden mostly in shade, he was on the very top of the tree in a tiny bit of sunlight. And he was singing his heart out. And for me, that was a really good reminder that actually I could sit in the shade all day and I could woe is me all day. And sometimes, you think you're pretty okay to do that, because life can be really tough and life can be really hard. But actually, the view from the top of the tree in the sunshine is a lot better and a lot more encouraging. And so the challenge is, where will we sit? When we feel like the world is in darkness, will we look for that light? And will we share our story and sing our tune from that light and walk with God? We're going to listen to a piece of music. It's just music, no words. And just to give ourselves a few minutes to pause and reflect and to say to God, how have you changed me? What did I learn through that? Or even just, help, where are you? I need to see the light. So if you just spend a few minutes listening to this music, and then we'll hand over to Noreen and we can have some sung worship as well as we finish our service. Thank you.